Hey guys, tonight we begin with the surprisingly mundane and sleepy world of koalas. Those fluffy marsupials who've mastered the art of doing absolutely nothing while somehow becoming one of Australia's most beloved icons. While everyone thinks they're adorable. Cuddly teddy bears. The truth is, koalas live possibly the most boring existence on Earth. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've been living in what can only be described as nature's most exclusive studio apartment for the better part of 6 months. Dark, warm, and with room service that arrives without you having to ask. But all good things must come to an end, and apparently, so must your lease on this particular piece of real estate. Your first glimpse of the outside world happens on a Tuesday. Not that you know it's Tuesday, or that you'll ever care about the concept of days of the week, but it seems worth mentioning for the sake of historical accuracy. You poke your head out of the pouch like someone checking if it's still raining. Except instead of rain, you're checking if the world is still disappointingly bright and full of things that aren't your mother's stomach lining. The transition from pouch to piggyback happens with all the ceremony of someone switching from one uncomfortable chair to another. Your mother doesn't announce this milestone, doesn't take photos, doesn't even seem to notice. She's too busy demonstrating the advanced koala technique of sleeping while vertical, a skill you'll spend the next several years trying to master. You cling to her back with the desperation of someone who's just realized they're on a roller coaster they never agreed to ride. Except, this roller coaster moves at the speed of continental drift, and makes about as many exciting turns as a geological survey. Your tiny claws dig into her fur, and you develop what will become a lifelong appreciation for the phrase, hanging on for dear life, even when that life is moving at roughly the same pace as erosion. The world, you quickly discover, is enormous and mostly vertical. Trees stretch up like nature's skyscrapers, except instead of elevators, everyone just climbs really, really slowly. Your mother navigates this arboreal metropolis with the confidence of someone who's never heard of the concept of falling, while you experience your first taste of motion sickness combined with existential dread. Your first lesson in koala philosophy comes not through words, but through the simple act of observation. Everything takes forever, and that's apparently not just acceptable, it's the entire point. Your mother moves from branch to branch with the urgency of someone who has all the time in the world and then some. She pauses between movements not because she's tired or planning her next step, but because pausing is simply what you do. It's like meditation, except less enlightened and more unconscious. You learn that speed is not just unnecessary in koala society, it's actually suspicious. Moving quickly suggests you have somewhere important to be, and having somewhere important to be implies you've made some serious life choices that your community would find deeply concerning. The world moves at the speed of continental drift when you're riding a koala, and you begin to understand that this isn't a bug in the system, it's the entire operating principle. Your culinary education begins with what can only be described as the world's most restrictive diet plan. Imagine being told that for the rest of your life, you can only eat one type of food, and then discovering that even within that impossibly narrow category, most varieties will kill you. Welcome to being a koala. Australia boasts over 600 species of eucalyptus trees, which sounds impressively diverse until you realize that you can safely digest maybe 12 of them without experiencing what your digestive system would consider a hostile takeover. It's like being given access to a massive buffet where 98% of the options are essentially poison, and the remaining 2% all taste like slightly different versions of crunchy disappointment. Your mother begins your education by showing you which leaves are acceptable. This process involves a lot of sniffing, some contemplative chewing, and the kind of intense focus usually reserved for bomb disposal experts. She demonstrates the proper technique. Grasp the leaf with both hands, bring it close to your nose, inhale deeply, as if you're sampling a fine wine, then bite down with the measured consideration of a food critic who knows their review might be their last. The first thing you learn is that eucalyptus leaves have the nutritional value of cardboard that's been soaked in cough medicine. They're tough, fibrous, and contain enough toxic compounds to make most animals reconsider their life choices. But you're not most animals, you're a koala, which means you've evolved to find this culinary nightmare not just edible, but apparently delicious. Your taste buds begin developing the kind of sophisticated palate that would make a wine sommelier weep with envy. except instead of detecting notes of blackcurrant and oak, you're identifying subtle differences between mildly poisonous leaf that tastes like antiseptic and mildly poisonous leaf that tastes like antiseptic with a hint of regret. You learn to distinguish between the red gum's robust toxicity and the forest red gum's more delicate approach to trying to kill you. The education process is entirely hands-on, or rather, mouth-on. Your mother doesn't explain which leaves are safe. She simply demonstrates by eating them and not dying. It's a teaching method that relies heavily on imitation and very lightly on any form of actual instruction. You watch her select leaves with the care of someone defusing a bomb, then attempt to replicate her technique, while hoping your amateur palate doesn't lead to an amateur mistake. Your first independent leaf selection becomes a moment of triumph that absolutely no one witnesses or cares about. You're sitting on a branch at dawn. The forest is quiet, except for the occasional sound of something being eaten by something else in the distance, and you reach for a leaf that you've identified as probably non-lethal. You grasp it, examine it, sniff it with the intensity of a customs agent, and take that first independent bite. It tastes exactly like every other eucalyptus leaf you've ever eaten, like nature's version of eating tree bark that's been marinated in cough syrup. But it's your choice, your leaf, selected by your increasingly sophisticated understanding of what constitutes edible versus merely toxic. It's a small victory in a life that will be measured entirely in small victories, and you celebrate by taking another bite and then settling in for a well-deserved 18-hour nap. Your first attempt at independent climbing happens on a morning when your mother decides she's had enough of carrying around what essentially amounts to a furry, oversized tick. She positions herself next to a particularly sturdy branch and gives you the kind of look that in human society would be accompanied by the words, "Off you go then." What follows can best be described as watching a drunk sloth having a philosophical argument with gravity while wearing oven mitts. Your limbs, which have spent months doing nothing more strenuous than occasionally gripping your mother's fur, suddenly find themselves responsible for supporting your entire body weight while navigating a three-dimensional maze of branches that all look identical. Your hands, you discover, are indeed built-in climbing equipment. Evolution has thoughtfully provided you with what amount to biological grappling hooks, sharp claws, opposable thumbs, and fingers designed specifically for gripping bark. Unfortunately, evolution forgot to include the instruction manual, and your brain is currently running on software that's approximately 6 months out of date. You reach for your first branch with the confidence of someone who's watched a lot of climbing but has never actually done any. Your claws make contact with bark, find purchase, and for a brief, glorious moment, you feel like you might actually know what you're doing. Then, physics intervenes with its usual lack of consideration for your feelings. The branch, which looked perfectly stable from a distance, turns out to have the structural integrity of a suggestion. It bends under your weight, you overcorrect, your grip loosens, and suddenly you're experiencing your first lesson in the difference between holding on and falling with style. You swing wildly, catch yourself on another branch, and spend several minutes hanging there like a furry ornament while you figure out what went wrong. Your mother watches this entire performance with the expression of someone observing a mildly interesting weather phenomenon, not concerned, not amused, just passively noting that yes, gravity still works, and yes, you're still figuring that out. She doesn't offer advice, doesn't rush to help, doesn't even seem particularly invested in the outcome. It's your first introduction to koala parenting philosophy. Sink or swim, except it's climb or fall, and either way, it's ultimately your problem. Early encounters with other forest residents provide your first lessons in interspecies relations. A kookaburra lands on a nearby branch and regards you with the kind of professional indifference usually reserved for background furniture. You're not interesting enough to eat, not threatening enough to worry about, and not entertaining enough to mock. You're simply there, occupying space in a way that neither enhances nor detracts from the kookaburra's day. A possum scurries past during one of your early climbing attempts, pauses briefly to watch you struggle with what should be a simple branch-to-branch transition, and continues on its way without comment. You get the distinct impression that if forest animals had social media, the possum would post something like, "Koala doing koala things," with an eye-roll emoji. Even the insects treat you with casual dismissal. A spider rebuilds its web around you while you're trying to figure out how to navigate past it, apparently confident that you're too slow to pose any threat to its architectural project. You spend 20 minutes carefully maneuvering around the web, which gives the spider enough time to finish its construction, catch a fly, and probably compose a brief memoir about patience. These encounters teach you that in the forest ecosystem, you occupy a very specific niche, the creature that everyone else uses as a reference point for not particularly exciting. You're not prey, you're not predator, you're not even particularly noteworthy. You're just there, being koala-shaped and moving at koala speed, which is apparently fine with everyone involved. Your first meeting with another koala who isn't your mother happens entirely by accident. You're practicing your newly acquired climbing skills on what you thought was an unoccupied tree when you suddenly find yourself face to face with another furry grey creature who looks exactly as surprised to see you as you are to see them. What follows is perhaps the most awkward social interaction in the history of mammalian communication. Both of you freeze, like two people who've walked into the wrong bathroom and are now trying to figure out how to leave without making eye contact. The other koala, slightly larger, possibly older, definitely more experienced, in the art of looking grumpy, stares at you with the expression of someone whose quiet afternoon has been interrupted by an unwelcome visitor. You stare back, mostly because you don't know what else to do. Your mother never covered the social protocols for meeting strangers, probably because the standard koala approach to strangers is to pretend they don't exist until they go away. The staring contest continues for what feels like several geological ages, but is probably only a few minutes. Neither of you blinks, neither of you moves, and neither of you seems to have any idea how this interaction is supposed to end. Eventually, the other koala makes what you interpret as a grunt of mild disapproval and shifts slightly to face away from you. This, you learn, is koala for, I acknowledge your existence, but would prefer not to. You respond with your own grunt, which comes out as more of a squeak and probably translates to something like, sorry for existing in your general vicinity. The other koala doesn't dignify this with a response. You spend the next hour sharing the same tree in complete silence, each of you pretending the other isn't there. It's like being in an elevator with someone you don't know, except the elevator is made of branches, and the awkward silence lasts significantly longer. Eventually, one of you leaves. You're not sure who moves first because you're both committed to the pretense that the other doesn't exist. This encounter teaches you everything you need to know about koala social dynamics. They barely exist, and when they do, they're conducted with all the enthusiasm of a tax audit. Meeting other koalas isn't a social opportunity. It's a mildly awkward interruption to an otherwise perfectly solitary day. Your mother's parenting style becomes increasingly clear as you grow more independent. Her approach can be summarized as, figure it out yourself. I've got 18 hours of sleep to catch up on. She doesn't provide detailed instructions for climbing, eating, or navigating social situations. Instead, she demonstrates by example and leaves you to draw your own conclusions. This isn't neglect, it's educational philosophy. Koala parenting operates on the principle that the best way to learn something is to be forced to figure it out yourself, while the person who could help you watches from a comfortable distance. Your mother is always nearby, always aware of your location, but always just far enough away that you can't rely on her to solve your problems for you. When you struggle with a particularly challenging branch configuration, she watches with the detached interest of a nature documentary narrator. When you spend 20 minutes trying to reach a cluster of leaves that are just slightly too far away, she doesn't suggest alternative approaches or offer assistance. She simply continues her own leaf-eating routine while you work through the problem yourself. This teaching method produces a particular kind of learning, the kind that comes from making mistakes, getting frustrated, trying again, and eventually succeeding through sheer persistence rather than instruction. It's character building in the most literal sense. You're building your character as someone who solves problems through patient experimentation rather than expecting help from others. The revelation that antisocial behavior isn't a character flaw in koala society, but rather the entire cultural foundation comes gradually. You begin to notice that every koala you encounter seems perfectly content with minimal social interaction. They don't seek out companionship, don't appear lonely, and don't seem to find the lack of conversation troubling. In fact, the koalas who seem most successful, the ones with the best territories, the most comfortable sleeping spots, the most efficient feeding routines, are also the ones who seem least interested in socializing. They've perfected the art of being alone without being lonely, of finding satisfaction in solitude rather than seeking it in social connections. You start to understand that what you initially interpreted as rudeness or indifference is actually a sophisticated social system based on mutual respect for personal space and individual autonomy. Koalas don't ignore each other out of hostility, they ignore each other out of politeness. The greatest gift you can give another koala is the gift of being left alone to pursue their own perfectly boring routine without interference. This realization is oddly liberating. You don't have to worry about making friends, maintaining relationships, or navigating complex social hierarchies. Your social obligations consist entirely of not bothering others and not being bothered by them. It's a system that maximizes individual comfort while minimizing interpersonal drama, and you begin to appreciate its elegant simplicity. As your early life progresses, you settle into this rhythm of productive solitude. You're learning to climb, developing your palate, and mastering the art of sleeping in trees while maintaining your grip. More importantly, you're learning that being alone doesn't mean being lonely, that independence doesn't require isolation, and that sometimes the most social thing you can do is to give everyone else the space they need to be perfectly contentedly antisocial. The forest around you continues its own rhythms, seasons change. Other animals go about their business. Weather patterns shift between boring and slightly less boring. And you, slowly but surely, are learning to be the most successfully boring creature in this entire ecosystem of professional time wasters. It's a skill that will serve you well for the rest of your delightfully unremarkable life. The end of your childhood arrives not with fanfare or ceremony, but with the gradual realization that your mother's pouch has become less of a cozy studio apartment and more of a cramped storage closet that you've outgrown in every possible dimension. What was once a perfect sanctuary now feels like trying to squeeze into clothes you wore 3 years ago, technically possible, but deeply uncomfortable for everyone involved. Your mother begins the weaning process with all the subtlety of someone slowly turning down the thermostat. She doesn't announce that pouch privileges are being revoked. She simply becomes less accommodating when you attempt to reverse engineer your way back into what was once your personal paradise. Her body language shifts from "come on in" to occupancy limits strictly enforced, and you find yourself spending increasingly long stretches clinging to her back like a furry reminder of responsibilities she'd rather not think about. The transition happens over weeks that feel like months, each day bringing new restrictions on your access to the luxury accommodations you'd taken for granted. Your mother's increasing disinterest in your existence isn't cruelty, it's cosmic indifference, the universe's way of gently nudging you toward the independence you didn't realize you were supposed to want. She doesn't push you away, she simply becomes less available, like a favorite restaurant that gradually reduces its hours until you're forced to find somewhere else to eat. You spend these transitional weeks in a state of confused nostalgia, constantly attempting to recreate the perfect comfort of your pouch days, while your mother demonstrates the koala equivalent of being too busy to talk right now. She's not avoiding you exactly, but she's developed an uncanny ability to be facing the other direction whenever you approach with that hopeful expression that says, "Remember when we used to hang out?" Your first solo night in a tree happens almost by accident. Your mother settles into her preferred sleeping position, a complex arrangement that somehow allows her to remain unconscious while clinging to vertical surfaces, and you realize that the geometry simply doesn't work anymore. There's no comfortable way to arrange yourself that doesn't involve either falling out of the tree or using your mother as an extremely unwilling mattress, so you find your own branch, just a few feet away, close enough that you're still technically in the same tree, but far enough that you're unmistakably on your own. You spend the first hour of that night convinced that you've made a terrible mistake, that independence is vastly overrated, and that being alone in a tree at night is probably how most koala horror stories begin. But then something interesting happens. The forest at night reveals itself to be not terrifying, but peaceful in a way you'd never noticed, when you were focused entirely on maintaining your grip on your mother's increasingly unavailable real estate. The sounds that initially seemed ominous, rustling leaves, distant animal calls, the gentle creaking of branches in the wind, begin to form a kind of natural white noise that's actually quite soothing. You discover that being alone is actually quite pleasant when you're built for it. When your entire evolutionary history has been preparing you for exactly this moment. Your body knows how to sleep while maintaining its grip on bark. Your ears know how to filter important sounds from background noise. Your internal clock knows when to wake up just enough to adjust your position before drifting back into unconsciousness. That first solo dawn brings a revelation that will shape the rest of your life. Solitude isn't something you have to endure. It's something you can enjoy. The sunrise filters through the eucalyptus leaves with a quality of light you'd never noticed when you were preoccupied with finding space on your mother's increasingly crowded back. The morning air carries scents that seem sharper, more detailed, when you're processing them independently rather than as part of a package deal. Your mother wakes up on her branch, notices that you've survived the night on your own, and acknowledges this milestone with the kind of casual indifference that in koala society represents profound approval. She doesn't congratulate you or express relief that you're still alive. She simply continues with her morning routine, as if independent survival is exactly what she expected from you all along. This becomes your new normal over the following weeks. Nights spent in your own carefully selected sleeping spots. Days spent exploring the expanding radius of what you're beginning to think of as your territory, rather than your mother's extended property. The weaning process completes itself through a combination of your increasing comfort with independence and your mother's increasing commitment to pretending you're someone else's responsibility now. House hunting, koala style, begins with the sobering realization that you're shopping in a market where every property looks identical, smells identical, and offers exactly the same amenities. It's like browsing real estate listings where every description reads, eucalyptus tree, vertical orientation, some branches, leaves included, no utilities, neighborhood quiet to the point of catatonia. Your first scouting expedition reveals the peculiar challenges of koala real estate acquisition. Unlike human house hunting, where location matters because of schools and commute times, koala property values are determined by factors like optimum sleeping branch configuration and leaf quality versus predator accessibility ratios. You're not looking for a house with character. You're looking for trees that will allow you to be characteristically unconscious for the maximum number of hours per day. The process begins with what you learn to think of as the sniff test. Each potential territory requires thorough olfactory investigation, not because you're particularly concerned with how things smell, but because scent carries information about previous occupancy. Eucalyptus trees retain aromatic signatures, like a hotel room retains traces of previous guests, and you're essentially checking for vacancy without having to ask anyone directly. You discover that reading eucalyptus real estate signs requires skills they don't teach in any formal educational program. Scratch marks on bark tell stories about previous tenants, their size, their claw sharpness, their territorial ambitions. Deep gouges suggest residents who took their property rights seriously. Light scratches might indicate someone who was just passing through, or someone whose grip strength suggests they won't be defending anything very vigorously. Scent markers are the koala equivalent of for sale signs, except they're more like previously occupied, or still under consideration, or approach at your own risk. You learn to distinguish between the territorial markings of koalas who are merely claiming space and those who are issuing what amounts to aromatic restraining orders. The difference is subtle but important, like the difference between please keep off the grass and trespassers will be prosecuted to the full extent of koala law. The occasional angry grunt from a distance serves as the koala version of a property survey, providing crucial information about boundary lines and the temperament of potential neighbors. These vocalizations translate roughly to, I see you there, and while I'm not immediately going to do anything about it, I want you to know that I'm aware of your existence and find it mildly irritating. Your first serious territory consideration involves a cluster of 3 river red gums that offer excellent branch diversity, adequate leaf quality, and what appears to be a reasonable distance from other established territories. The trees aren't particularly remarkable, they're not the tallest in the forest, don't have the densest foliage, and certainly don't offer what anyone would call scenic views, but they have something more valuable in koala society. They're available and adequately boring. You spend several days conducting what amounts to a feasibility study, testing various branches for sleeping comfort, sampling leaves for toxicity levels, and generally behaving like someone who's considering a major life investment, which, in koala terms, you are. These 3 trees could potentially serve as your home base for the next several decades, assuming no one else decides they want them and you don't get eaten by something larger. The territorial claim process involves a combination of scent marking, strategic scratching, and the kind of persistent occupation that suggests you're not just visiting. You begin spending entire days in your prospective territory, not because you have anything particular to do there, but because presence equals ownership in the surprisingly straightforward world of koala property law. Your scent marking technique develops through trial and error, mostly error. The goal is to establish your aromatic signature without overdoing it to the point where you attract unwanted attention from territorial disputes. Arbitrators, larger, grumpier koalas with strong opinions about boundary violations. You're aiming for occupied rather than aggressively defended, like the difference between hanging a no solicitors sign and installing a security system with laser-guided deterrence. The defense of your newly acquired territory becomes an exercise in strategic laziness. You don't actively patrol your boundaries that would require far too much energy and suggest an unseemly level of interest in conflict. Instead, You defend through persistent occupation, making it clear through your continuous presence that these particular trees are spoken for. Its passive resistance elevated to an art form, like a sit-in protest conducted entirely through sleeping. Other koalas occasionally test your territorial commitment by wandering into your tree range with the casual attitude of someone who might just be passing through, but could also be conducting reconnaissance for a potential hostile takeover. These encounters are resolved through elaborate displays of mutual indifference, where both parties pretend the other doesn't exist while carefully maintaining positions that demonstrate their respective claims to the disputed space. Your territory, once established, becomes the foundation for everything else in your adult life. These three unremarkable trees, defended with the passion of someone defending their parking spot, represent security, routine, and the kind of predictable boredom that koalas consider the height of luxury. You've achieved the koala version of home ownership, and like all homeowners, you'll spend the rest of your life dealing with maintenance issues and property value fluctuations in the local eucalyptus market. The art of hanging motionless for hours while looking vaguely contemplative becomes your first serious professional skill, the koala equivalent of learning to touch type or mastering Excel formulas. It's a deceptively complex ability that requires the coordination of multiple biological systems, working in perfect harmony to create the illusion that you're doing absolutely nothing while actually performing a sophisticated feat of biomechanical engineering. Your training begins with what you think of as basic stillness. Learning to remain in one position long enough that small birds begin to consider you a landscape feature rather than a potential threat. This involves mastering the subtle muscle tensions that keep you from falling out of trees while expending the minimum possible amount of energy. It's like learning to meditate, except the meditation has genuine survival value and the lotus position is replaced by clinging to bark while unconscious. The looking vaguely contemplative component of this skill requires more finesse than you initially realize. The goal isn't to appear deep in thought that would suggest mental activity levels incompatible with proper koala lifestyle choices. Instead, you're cultivating an expression that suggests you might be thinking about something, but probably aren't, and definitely aren't thinking about anything urgent enough to require immediate action. You practice different variations of contemplative facial expressions in what amounts to koala method acting. There's mildly philosophical about eucalyptus, which involves a slight upward gaze that suggests you might be pondering the deeper meaning of photosynthesis. There's generally satisfied with current circumstances, characterized by a relaxed jaw and half-closed eyes that communicate contentment without enthusiasm. And there's your specialty, present but not participating, an expression that acknowledges the world's existence without suggesting any intention of engaging with it. Advanced leaf evaluation becomes your equivalent of wine tasting, except instead of developing a sophisticated palate for vintages and terroir, you're calibrating your taste buds to detect increasingly subtle variations in plant toxicity and fiber content. Your preferences become so specific they border on the absurd, like a food critic who can only eat Tuesday's harvest of leaves from the southeastern quadrant of trees that are exactly 30 feet tall and have been rained on within the past 72 hours. You develop a personal rating system for eucalyptus leaves that takes into account factors most creatures would consider irrelevant to the point of comedy. Leaf age becomes critical too young, and the toxic compound concentrations are unpredictable, too old, and the fiber content makes chewing feel like trying to eat rope. The time of day affects flavor profiles in ways that seem scientifically impossible, but are nonetheless detectable to your increasingly refined palate. Weather conditions at the time of leaf formation apparently influence taste in ways that would impress meteorologists if they cared about the gastronomic preferences of arboreal marsupials. Leaves that develop during periods of specific humidity and temperature ranges have subtle characteristics that you learn to identify and prefer, turning your diet into a complex algorithm of environmental variables and botanical chemistry. Your leaf selection process evolves into a ritual that resembles a combination of meditation and quality control inspection. You approach each potential meal with the systematic thoroughness of someone whose survival depends on making exactly the right choice, which, technically, it does. The sniffing phase alone can take several minutes as you process aromatic data that reveals information about the leaf's chemical composition, age, and probable effects on your digestive system. Sleep optimization becomes your most advanced skill set, the area where you truly excel beyond the capabilities of most mammals. You discover new and innovative ways to be unconscious while maintaining your grip, positions that allow for maximum rest while minimizing the energy expenditure required to avoid falling to your death. It's engineering applied to unconsciousness, physics in service of professional-level sleeping. Your sleeping position repertoire expands to include variations for different weather conditions, branch configurations, and seasonal requirements. There's the summer sprawl, which maximizes surface area for heat dissipation while maintaining three-point contact with supportive branches. The winter huddle minimizes exposed surface area and takes advantage of your fur's insulation properties. And your masterpiece, the rain position, which keeps your face dry while ensuring that water runoff doesn't accumulate in places that would wake you up. You learn to calibrate your unconsciousness levels throughout the day, maintaining just enough awareness to adjust your grip when branches shift in the wind, while remaining deeply enough asleep to achieve genuine rest. It's like having a sleep monitoring system that works entirely through unconscious muscle memory, allowing you to nap safely in situations that would be fatal for less specialized creatures. The development of position-specific sleeping techniques becomes your graduate-level coursework in applied unconsciousness. You master the art of sleeping while vertical, horizontal, inverted, and in several positions that don't have names because no other animals have ever been foolish enough to attempt them. Each position requires different muscle engagement patterns, different grip strategies, and different breathing techniques to maintain adequate oxygen flow while upside down. Your first bushfire season arrives with the kind of atmospheric drama that suggests the universe has decided to test every assumption you've made about the pace of koala life. For months, you've been perfecting the art of moving at speeds that make geological processes look hasty. And suddenly the forest is suggesting that perhaps this might be an appropriate time to consider alternative velocity settings. The smell arrives first, smoke-carrying scents that your evolutionary memory recognizes as synonymous with time to be somewhere else. Your nostrils, finely tuned to detect subtle variations in eucalyptus aromatics, suddenly find themselves processing information about combustion temperatures and wind direction. The air tastes like urgency, a flavor that's completely foreign to your normal dietary experience. For the first time in your life, you experience what other animals probably consider normal response times to environmental threats. Your movement speed increases from imperceptible to merely very slow, which in koala terms represents a significant lifestyle adjustment. You find yourself climbing at velocities that feel recklessly fast, covering distances in hours that would normally require days of careful consideration. The evacuation process reveals skills you didn't know you possessed. Your route-finding abilities, usually employed for locating marginally better sleeping branches, suddenly become crucial for navigating toward areas with fewer combustible materials and better escape options. You move through the forest with something approaching purpose, which feels distinctly unnatural but seems preferable to the alternative of becoming a crispy marsupial. Other forest residents are also adjusting their normal behavior patterns, creating a temporary community of mutual urgency. Possums that usually ignore you entirely now acknowledge your existence with the brief solidarity of fellow refugees. Birds that typically treat you as mobile furniture now regard you as a co-participant in the shared project of not being on fire. You learn that koalas have emergency protocols built into their behavioral repertoire, instincts that remain dormant during normal boring times, but activate when the environment stops cooperating with your preferred lifestyle of productive inactivity. Your body seems to know things your conscious mind never learned about fire behavior, wind patterns, and the relative safety of different terrain types. The post-fire period brings its own challenges, as you assess the damage to your carefully established territory. Some of your trees have survived with minimal impact, while others now resemble enormous charcoal sculptures with delusions of still being alive. Your territory boundaries have been redrawn by forces completely outside your control, and you're faced with the prospect of either expanding into newly available areas or relocating entirely. Drought periods present a different kind of environmental challenge, one that affects your food supply rather than your immediate physical safety, but proves equally disruptive to your established routines. When even the boring trees become scarce, you're forced to expand your territory range and lower your standards for acceptable leaf quality, like a food critic reduced to eating at highway rest stops. The eucalyptus trees that normally provide reliable mediocrity begin showing signs of stress that translate directly into reduced leaf palatability. Trees that you've relied on for years start producing leaves with elevated toxic compound concentrations, turning your regular dietary rotation into a series of calculated risks. You're forced to become more adventurous in your foraging, trying tree varieties you'd previously dismissed as inadequately boring. Water scarcity affects your hydration strategies, which normally consist of extracting moisture from eucalyptus leaves and hoping for the best. During drought conditions, you learn to supplement this system by seeking out morning dew, tree hollow moisture, and other water sources that require more effort to obtain than your usual zero-effort approach to fluid intake. Human encounters become increasingly frequent as your expanded foraging range brings you into contact with those strange, loud creatures who point cameras at you while you try to sleep. These interactions reveal the peculiar human fascination with koala behavior, as if your commitment to being unconscious in trees represents some kind of aspirational lifestyle choice, rather than simple evolutionary practicality. The humans seem particularly excited when you do anything other than sleep, treating basic activities like eating or moving between branches as if they're witnessing rare and significant events. They make sounds that you interpret as expressions of delight when you exhibit normal koala behaviors, suggesting that your lifestyle choices are somehow entertaining to species with different priorities. You learn to navigate human presence with the same strategic indifference you apply to other environmental factors. They're not particularly threatening, too slow to catch you, too loud to surprise you, and apparently more interested in creating visual records of your existence than in actually interacting with you. They become part of the landscape, like unusually animated tree stumps that occasionally make appreciative noises. Camera flashes and tourist chatter become background noise that you learn to incorporate into your sleep cycles, like urban koalas learning to nap through traffic sounds. The humans seem to find your ability to remain unconscious despite their presence either impressive or disappointing, depending on their expectations for wildlife interaction experiences. Your growth spurts arrive with all the dignity and coordination of someone trying to wear a suit that changes size while they're putting it on. Over the course of several months, your body begins implementing what appears to be a random expansion protocol, growing different parts at different rates and leaving you looking like a teenager, wearing their parents' fur coat that's been tailored by someone with a questionable understanding of mammalian proportions. Your limbs extend faster than your coordination can adapt, leaving you with reach capabilities that your brain hasn't quite figured out how to operate. Branches that were once perfectly positioned for comfortable gripping suddenly require awkward stretching or uncomfortable scrunching. You find yourself constantly recalibrating your spatial awareness as your body occupies increasingly more space in ways that feel foreign and unwieldy. The fur situation becomes particularly ridiculous during this period. Your coat grows in patches and phases, creating an appearance that can best be described as molting in slow motion, or wearing several different animals simultaneously. Areas of sleek adult fur alternate with patches of juvenile fluff, giving you the general appearance of someone who's been interrupted halfway through a costume change. Your face undergoes what can only be called structural renovations, as your skull expands and your features rearrange themselves according to some internal blueprint that apparently prioritizes function over maintaining a semblance of photogenic consistency. Your nose becomes more prominent, your ears adjust their positioning, and your overall facial expression shifts from adorable juvenile to potentially grumpy adult in training. Voice changes arrive as perhaps the most awkward aspect of your adolescent transformation. Your grunts, which had previously been consistently squeaky and unthreatening, begin exhibiting unpredictable variations in pitch and volume. What starts as a simple expression of mild dissatisfaction might emerge as anything from a soprano squeak to a bass rumble, often changing mid-grunt in ways that surprise you as much as anyone else who might be listening. You practice your new vocal ranges during solo moments, testing the capabilities of your evolving communication equipment, like someone learning to play an instrument they never asked for. The deeper tones feel strange in your throat, and you have to concentrate to produce sounds that don't crack or waver unexpectedly. Your territorial grunts, once charmingly ineffective, now carry actual authority, which feels both empowering and slightly concerning. The realization that your voice changes, somehow make you even less interesting than before, represents a significant milestone in your psychological development. You're not just growing up, you're growing into a more advanced version of boring, like upgrading to premium mediocrity. Your grunts become deeper, and somehow even less conversational, more like mechanical acknowledgements of existence than attempts at communication. Your sleep patterns require constant adjustment, as your growing body demands different positioning strategies and support configurations. Branches that once provided perfect sleeping comfort now create pressure points, or fail to accommodate your expanding dimensions. You're forced to scout for new sleeping locations with improved size specifications, like apartment hunting for someone whose furniture keeps getting bigger. The most profound change, however, is the dawning realization that this is it. This is your whole life plan, and you're already becoming quite good at it. The teenage angst that might plague other species takes a distinctly koala form. Instead of rebelling against authority or questioning life choices, You experience existential acceptance at an alarmingly young age. You look around at your territory, your routine, your carefully optimized diet of marginally toxic leaves, and realize that you've found your calling in life. Other young adults might spend years figuring out their career paths or life purposes, but you've achieved perfect clarity about your goals. Sleep more efficiently, eat more selectively, and defend your territory with the minimum possible energy expenditure. This realization brings a sense of peace that's probably inappropriate for someone your age. While other creatures are still figuring out their identities, you've already settled into the comfortable certainty of knowing exactly who you are and what you're supposed to be doing with your life. You're a koala who owns 3 eucalyptus trees and has strong opinions about leaf quality. It's not much, but it's yours. Your coming-of-age process culminates not with dramatic ceremony or rites of passage, but with the quiet satisfaction of having successfully transitioned from someone who sleeps in trees to someone who sleeps in their own trees. You've achieved the koala version of adulting: independent territory ownership, advanced sleeping skills, and the kind of dietary sophistication that impresses absolutely no one but serves you well. The awkwardness fades as you grow into your new proportions and vocal ranges, but the fundamental realization remains. You've become exactly what you were always meant to be, which is a slightly larger, more competent version of what you already were. In a world of endless possibilities, you've chosen the path of perfecting the art of doing very little, very well, in your own designated trees. And somehow, this feels exactly right. Your first real confrontation with another koala arrives on a Thursday afternoon, when you discover someone else has apparently decided that your carefully selected eucalyptus tree makes an excellent lunch venue. Not your territory. You're not naive enough to think you can defend 3 entire trees simultaneously, but specifically your favorite lunch tree, the one with the optimal branch configuration for comfortable eating, and the leaves that taste like mild disappointment rather than aggressive regret. The intruder is roughly your size, which suggests they're either confident in their territorial dispute resolution skills or haven't yet learned to properly assess the commitment level of koalas who've invested significant time in branch-by-branch territory optimization. They're positioned about 15 feet up your tree, methodically working through what you consider to be your personal reserve of premium mediocre leaves, apparently oblivious to the fact that they're committing what amounts to eucalyptus trespassing. What follows can only be described as the most intense slow-motion standoff in the history of mammalian territorial disputes. You position yourself on a branch directly opposite the intruder, close enough to make your displeasure clear but far enough away to avoid any actual physical contact, which would require energy expenditure levels incompatible with proper koala conflict resolution protocols. The staring contest begins with both of you adopting expressions that convey serious territorial concern while maintaining the kind of dignified composure that prevents the situation from escalating into anything resembling actual action. Your opponent stares at you with the intensity of someone who's prepared to defend their right to be in this tree for as long as necessary. You stare back with the focused determination of someone whose entire lifestyle depends on maintaining exclusive access to specific eucalyptus resources. 3 hours pass. Neither of you moves, blinks with any regularity, or shows any signs of backing down from this arboreal stalemate. Occasionally, one of you shifts position slightly, not retreating, just optimizing comfort levels for what's beginning to look like an extended engagement. The afternoon sun moves across the sky, shadows shift, temperature fluctuates, and still both of you remain locked in this epic battle of wills that resembles nothing so much as 2 people trying to outweight each other in the world's most boring waiting room. The resolution comes not through violence or dramatic posturing, but through what can only be called aggressive leaf eating. Your opponent, perhaps deciding that the best way to establish dominance is through superior consumption rates, begins eating leaves with deliberate, methodical intensity while maintaining eye contact. Each bite is carefully calculated to demonstrate both their commitment to remaining in this tree and their ability to process eucalyptus with greater efficiency than you. You respond with your own display of aggressive mastication, selecting leaves with exaggerated care and consuming them with the kind of focused attention that suggests you could continue this eating contest indefinitely. The message is clear. This is your tree, these are your leaves, and you're prepared to out-eat any challenger who thinks they can establish territorial claims through superior digestive performance. Eventually, the intruder concludes that defending this particular tree isn't worth the energy investment required to maintain an eating contest against someone with your obvious commitment to eucalyptus-based territorial defense. They execute what you interpret as a strategic withdrawal, not fleeing, but simply relocating to pursue their leafy objectives in less contested territory. You learn that koala combat consists mainly of sitting in different trees and grunting disapprovingly, which suits your temperament perfectly. Physical confrontation would require energy expenditure and risk assessment protocols far too complex for your lifestyle preferences. Instead, koala territorial disputes are resolved through elaborate displays of mutual stubbornness, like a chess match played entirely through positioning and eye contact. Your victory in this confrontation establishes your reputation as that koala who lives in those trees over there, a territorial designation that carries significant weight in local koala social circles. Other koalas begin to associate your scent markers and scratching patterns with someone who takes property rights seriously enough to engage in extended staring contests, but not so seriously as to risk actual physical exertion. This reputation serves as a deterrent for future territorial challenges. Word spreads through the koala community via scent trails, and the occasional grunt-based communication that your trees are defended by someone with the patience for prolonged standoffs and the dietary commitment to win eating. Contests. It's not exactly a fearsome reputation, but in koala society, being known as someone who's too stubborn to give up is often more effective than being known as someone who's dangerous. Your 22-hour sleep schedule becomes a masterpiece of biological optimization, refined through months of careful experimentation and adjusted with the precision of someone whose entire quality of life depends on maximizing unconsciousness efficiency. You approach sleep with the dedication of a professional athlete training for competition, except your sport is remaining motionless, while vertical and your performance metrics are measured in hours of successful non-awareness. The schedule requires careful timing and environmental assessment. You don't simply fall asleep randomly, you strategically deploy unconsciousness at optimal intervals to maximize rest, while minimizing the risk of missing important developments like weather changes, territorial incursions, or the rare occurrence of something actually happening in your vicinity that might require a conscious response. Your sleep phases are calibrated to natural light cycles, temperature fluctuations, and the feeding patterns of potential predators who might view an unconscious koala as an easy meal opportunity. You've learned to maintain just enough awareness to detect changes in wind direction that might indicate approaching weather systems, while remaining deeply enough asleep to achieve genuine rest and conservation of caloric resources. The remaining 2 hours of your daily schedule are divided between eating, moving between trees, and what you've come to think of as existential contemplation, though it's possible that what you interpret as deep philosophical thinking is actually just the mental fog that results from a diet consisting entirely of mildly toxic leaves. The eating portion requires approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes, including time for leaf selection, quality assessment, and the actual consumption process. Moving between trees accounts for roughly 30 minutes of your day, though this varies depending on your specific territorial patrol requirements and whether you're relocating for better sleeping conditions or simply because you've temporarily exhausted the acceptable leaf supply in your current location. The movement itself is conducted at velocities that make continental drift look hasty, but it serves important functions in territory maintenance and resource management. The remaining 15 minutes are allocated to existential contemplation, though contemplation might be an overly generous description of the mental process involved. These are the moments when you pause between activities and engage in what might charitably be called thinking about your circumstances, your choices, and your place in the broader eucalyptus-based ecosystem that defines your world. These contemplative periods often involve examining questions like whether the leaves in the eastern section of your territory are actually superior to those in the western section, or whether the branch configuration in tree number 2 provides better sleeping support than the arrangement in tree number 3. These are the deep philosophical questions that occupy your consciousness during the brief intervals when consciousness is actually available for occupation. Seasonal adjustments to your routine involve changing absolutely nothing, which represents a level of consistency that would impress efficiency experts if they were aware of your operational protocols. Whether it's summer heat, winter cold, spring growth patterns, or autumn leaf changes, your basic schedule remains fundamentally unchanged because it's already optimized for year-round effectiveness. The genius of your routine lies in its adaptability through complete inflexibility. Instead of modifying your behavior to accommodate seasonal variations, you've developed a system that works equally well, regardless of external conditions. Your 22-hour sleep schedule provides adequate rest in any weather. Your 2-hour activity window allows for necessary maintenance regardless of temperature or precipitation. Your territorial requirements remain constant, because they're based on resource availability rather than seasonal preferences. Even dramatic weather events like storms or temperature extremes are absorbed into your routine without requiring fundamental schedule modifications. You might adjust your specific sleeping positions to account for wind patterns or precipitation, but the basic structure of your day remains unchanged. It's like having developed a personal operating system that's so robust it doesn't require updates regardless of changing environmental conditions. The annual mating season arrives like an unwelcome alarm clock in your otherwise perfectly regulated existence, bringing with it the kind of biological imperatives that threaten to disrupt your carefully optimized daily routine. For 11 months of the year, your biggest concern is maintaining adequate leaf quality standards and optimizing sleep positions. Then mating season arrives, and suddenly you're expected to engage in behaviors that require significantly more energy expenditure than you've budgeted for in your lifestyle planning. Your boring life gets slightly less boring, but not by much, which perfectly captures the koala approach to reproduction. Even the most biologically urgent activities are conducted with characteristic lack of urgency. Other animals might experience mating season as a dramatic surge of hormonal activity and competitive behavior. Koalas experience it as a mild increase in social awareness and the occasional need to make sounds that might charitably be called mating calls. Learning to make these mating calls becomes your first venture into what could loosely be termed performance art. The sounds you're biologically programmed to produce during mating season can best be described as resembling a rusty gate, having emotional problems, or perhaps a mechanical device that's trying to express feelings it doesn't understand. The calls are deep, resonant, and somehow manage to convey both romantic interest and existential confusion simultaneously. You practice these vocalizations during private moments, testing various approaches to expressing mating availability through sounds that seem designed to attract partners who appreciate atmospheric audio experiences over conventional melody. The calls need to be loud enough to carry across significant distances through eucalyptus forest, distinctive enough to identify you as a potential mate rather than some other type of distressed animal, and expressive enough to convey whatever romantic sentiments koalas are supposed to convey. The acoustic properties of eucalyptus forests require specific vocal techniques to achieve adequate projection and resonance. You learn to position yourself on branches that provide optimal sound amplification, facing directions that maximize your call's travel distance, while minimizing echo interference from surrounding trees. It's like learning to perform in a concert hall designed by someone who prioritizes acoustics over audience comfort. Competing for female attention requires developing displays of superior tree-sitting and leaf-chewing prowess, which sounds like it should be easy given that these are activities you've been perfecting for years, but performing them competitively introduces pressure dynamics you hadn't previously considered. You're not just sitting in trees anymore. You're demonstrating your tree-sitting capabilities for evaluation by potential romantic partners who presumably have standards for acceptable arboreal positioning techniques. Your leaf-chewing demonstrations become elaborate performances designed to showcase your dietary sophistication and jaw strength. You select leaves with exaggerated care, process them with methodical precision, and consume them with the kind of focused attention that suggests you could maintain adequate nutrition for yourself and potentially offspring. The message you're trying to convey is something like, "Observe my superior eucalyptus processing capabilities, and imagine the offspring we could raise together on this quality of leaf evaluation." The competitive aspects of mating season require energy expenditures that disrupt your carefully balanced lifestyle optimization protocols. You find yourself staying awake for slightly longer periods, moving between trees more frequently to establish visibility with potential mates, and engaging in territorial displays that involve more aggressive positioning than your normal conflict avoidance strategies would typically permit. Koala courtship rituals make watching grass grow seem action-packed, which is exactly how you prefer your romantic encounters. Low pressure, energy efficient, and conducted according to principles that prioritize mutual compatibility over dramatic romantic gestures. The entire process is designed around the koala, understanding that lasting relationships are built on shared values, like territorial respect, similar sleeping schedules, and compatible leaf preferences. Your first serious romantic interest is identified not through dramatic attraction or love at first sight scenarios, but through the practical assessment that she occupies territory adjacent to yours, maintains what appears to be a reasonable sleeping schedule, and demonstrates leaf-chewing techniques that suggest adequate dietary standards. She's not the most exciting koala in the forest, but excitement is overrated when you're looking for someone who won't disrupt your carefully optimized lifestyle. The initial courtship phase involves a series of carefully orchestrated encounters that resemble diplomatic negotiations more than romantic pursuit. You position yourself within her visual range during her active hours, demonstrating your presence without intruding on her territorial boundaries. She acknowledges your existence through subtle body language adjustments that indicate awareness without suggesting either welcome or rejection. These preliminary interactions continue for several weeks, gradually escalating to include occasional vocal acknowledgements, grunts that convey recognition, and mild approval without committing either party to any specific romantic obligations. The courtship process is essentially an extended compatibility assessment conducted through parallel activities and mutual observation. Your first relationship develops with all the passionate intensity of two people, slowly realizing they have similar television preferences. The romantic connection is established not through dramatic declarations or grand gestures, but through the recognition that you both approach life with compatible levels of energy, conservation, and territorial maintenance priorities. The relationship itself is conducted mostly through parallel sleeping, which proves to be an ideal foundation for koala romance. You establish adjacent sleeping positions that provide companionship without requiring continuous interaction or conversation. It's like being in a relationship with someone who shares your commitment to being unconscious for the vast majority of your shared time together. Communication in the relationship consists primarily of comfortable silence, punctuated by the occasional grunt that might convey anything from "good morning" to "I acknowledge your continued existence" in a positive, contensive way. The lack of extensive verbal communication isn't a sign of relationship problems. It's evidence of profound compatibility between partners, who both understand that most things worth saying can be adequately expressed through strategic positioning and the quality of one's sleeping posture. Your romantic activities are scheduled around both partners' sleep requirements and territorial maintenance obligations. Date nights involve synchronized leaf-eating sessions and parallel tree-sitting experiences that allow for companionship without disrupting either partner's established routines. It's romance designed for maximum efficiency and minimum effort, which suits both of your temperaments perfectly. The realization that even koala romance is designed for maximum efficiency and minimum effort brings a sense of relief that you're not expected to fundamentally alter your lifestyle to accommodate romantic relationships. Your partner demonstrates the same commitment to energy conservation and routine optimization that you've developed, creating a relationship dynamic based on mutual appreciation for each other's dedication to doing as little as possible, as well as possible. Physical affection is expressed through proximity rather than contact, allowing both partners to demonstrate care and commitment without requiring energy expenditures incompatible with koala lifestyle principles. You show affection by choosing to sleep in the same tree, by sharing information about optimal leaf locations, and by coordinating your territorial patrol schedules to maximize security while minimizing redundant effort. Your sleeping position repertoire expands to include sophisticated variations designed for specific weather conditions, each position representing years of experimentation and refinement in the pursuit of perfect unconsciousness optimization. The summer positions prioritize heat dissipation and airflow, utilizing branch configurations that maximize exposed surface area while maintaining the three-point contact necessary for safety during unconsciousness. The summer sprawl becomes your signature hot weather position, involving a complex arrangement where your body is distributed across multiple branches to create maximum cooling surface area, while your grip points are strategically positioned to maintain security, even during deep sleep phases. It's like yoga designed by someone whose primary concern is remaining safely unconscious while vertical during temperature extremes. Your winter positions prioritize heat conservation and wind protection, utilizing your fur's insulation properties and the natural windbreak capabilities of dense eucalyptus foliage. The winter huddle involves compacting your body into the smallest possible configuration while maintaining adequate circulation and grip security. You learn to identify branch clusters that provide natural sheltering from prevailing wind patterns while maintaining access to acceptable leaf supplies. The rain position represents your masterpiece of weather-specific sleeping optimization, developed through extensive trial and error during particularly wet seasons. This position keeps your face dry while ensuring that water runoff doesn't accumulate in places that would wake you up, channeling precipitation away from critical areas while maintaining the grip security necessary for sleeping safely in wet conditions. You develop seasonal subvariations within each major position category, adjusting for the specific environmental conditions that occur during different parts of each season. Early summer positions account for increased insect activity, while late summer positions prioritize protection from the more intense heat and UV exposure that occurs during peak temperature periods. Advanced techniques for ignoring everything happening around you become crucial life skills that allow you to maintain your lifestyle preferences despite increasing environmental distractions. You master the art of selective attention, learning to filter out irrelevant stimuli while maintaining awareness of genuinely important developments like predator presence or territorial incursions. Your noise filtration capabilities develop to the point where you can sleep through tourist groups, taking photographs, construction activities from nearby human developments, and the mating calls of other koalas who haven't yet learned to modulate their vocalizations for neighborhood compatibility. You maintain unconscious awareness of sounds that might indicate danger, while completely ignoring acoustic information that doesn't require immediate response. The technique extends beyond auditory filtering to include visual and tactile stimulus management. You learn to sleep with your eyes partially open during daylight hours, maintaining minimal visual monitoring of your environment while achieving genuine rest. Your body develops the ability to maintain protective responses to significant tactile stimuli, while filtering out minor disturbances like insects, small branches touching your fur, or weather-related sensations that don't require conscious attention. Your understanding of branch load-bearing capacity becomes increasingly sophisticated as your weight increases and your territorial activities become more ambitious. You develop an intuitive sense of which branches can support your increasing bulk during various activities, from sleeping to aggressive leaf eating to territorial positioning during confrontations with other koalas. This knowledge extends beyond simple weight calculations to include dynamic loading assessments that account for movement, wind effects, and the seasonal variations in branch flexibility that occur as eucalyptus trees respond to weather patterns and growth cycles. You learn to read the subtle signs that indicate when a branch is approaching its load limits, allowing you to make positioning adjustments before reaching the point of structural failure. Your branch assessment skills become so refined that you can evaluate the safety and comfort potential of unfamiliar trees within minutes of arrival, reading the bark patterns, branch angles, and foliage density that indicate optimal sleeping and feeding opportunities. It's like being able to assess real estate value instantly through visual inspection, except your criteria are based on unconsciousness optimization rather than market trends. Learning to predict weather changes by the smell of eucalyptus leaves represents the pinnacle of your environmental integration, the point where you've become so attuned to your ecosystem that you're essentially functioning as a biological weather monitoring system. The eucalyptus trees respond to atmospheric pressure changes, humidity fluctuations, and temperature variations hours before these changes become obvious through conventional weather indicators. Your olfactory system learns to detect the subtle chemical changes that occur in eucalyptus leaf composition as trees respond to approaching weather systems. Increased humidity causes changes in the concentration of aromatic compounds that you can detect well before humans would notice any atmospheric differences. Barometric pressure changes trigger responses in the tree's metabolic processes that alter the scent profiles of their leaves in ways that become apparent to your increasingly sophisticated nose. The prediction system extends beyond simple rain detection to include forecasting wind direction changes, temperature fluctuations, and seasonal transitions. You learn to smell approaching cold fronts through the chemical signatures that eucalyptus trees emit as they begin adjusting their metabolic processes for temperature changes. Similarly, you can detect the approach of hot, dry periods through alterations in leaf moisture content and aromatic compound concentrations. Your weather prediction capabilities become accurate enough that you begin adjusting your sleep positions and territorial patrol schedules based on scent-based atmospheric forecasting, rather than waiting for obvious environmental changes. You relocate to more sheltered sleeping positions hours before storms arrive, and you adjust your feeding schedules to take advantage of optimal leaf quality periods that occur in specific atmospheric conditions. Navigation skills that allow you to find the exact same tree in the dark develop through a combination of olfactory mapping, spatial memory, and tactile landmark recognition. Your territorial knowledge becomes so detailed that you can navigate your range in complete darkness, using scent trails, bark texture variations, and the unique branch configuration patterns that distinguish each of your trees from all others in the forest. Your scent-based navigation system works like an aromatic GPS, allowing you to track your movement through your territory using the olfactory landmarks you've established through months of regular patrol and maintenance activities. Each tree in your range has a distinct scent signature created by your territorial markings, the specific eucalyptus variety, and the accumulated aromatic history of your presence and activities. The system extends beyond your immediate territory to include navigation capabilities throughout the broader eucalyptus forest. You develop the ability to return to your home range from significant distances by following scent corridors and environmental indicators that guide you through unfamiliar terrain back to known landmarks. It's like having an internal compass that operates through smell rather than magnetic fields. Your tactical awareness, while appearing completely unconscious, represents the ultimate achievement in koala multitasking. The ability to maintain comprehensive environmental monitoring while achieving genuine rest and energy conservation. You master the art of looking alert while being completely unconscious, a skill that provides significant advantages in both territorial defense and predator avoidance. The technique involves maintaining minimal sensory input, processing during sleep phases, allowing your unconscious mind to monitor for significant changes, while your conscious awareness achieves genuine rest. You learn to calibrate your unconscious alertness levels based on environmental conditions, maintaining higher monitoring levels during periods of increased territorial activity or predator presence, while allowing deeper rest during periods of confirmed safety. Your apparent alertness while unconscious becomes so convincing that other animals, including potential territorial challengers and predators, often interpret your sleeping form as an actively vigilant koala, maintaining conscious territorial surveillance. This misperception provides natural deterrent effects that reduce the actual security risks associated with extended unconsciousness periods. The mastery of this technique allows you to achieve optimal rest while maintaining the appearance of territorial vigilance, creating a lifestyle optimization system that provides both genuine energy conservation and effective security protocols. You've essentially learned to sleep with your reputation intact, maintaining your territorial standing while achieving the unconsciousness levels necessary for long-term health and energy management. Your early adulthood reaches its peak performance period with the integration of all these optimization systems into a cohesive lifestyle approach that maximizes comfort, security, and energy efficiency while minimizing effort, risk, and unnecessary social interaction. You've become the koala equivalent of a perfectly tuned machine. Except instead of producing something, you're optimized for the sophisticated art of producing nothing at all, but doing it better than anyone else. Your life becomes a masterpiece of predictability, refined through years of careful optimization into something that resembles less a daily routine and more a perfectly choreographed ballet of productive inactivity. The same trees, the same leaves, the same 22-hour sleep cycle. These elements combine into a lifestyle so consistent that it transcends routine and enters the realm of natural law like photosynthesis or gravity, except more boring and somehow more reliable. The precision of your established patterns would impress efficiency experts if they were capable of appreciating systems designed around the elimination of unnecessary activity rather than the maximization of productivity. Your day unfolds with the reliability of sunrise, each activity flowing seamlessly into the next according to timing protocols that you've internalized so completely they operate without conscious oversight. Tree number 1 serves as your morning headquarters, where you conduct the day's first leaf quality assessment and engage in what might generously be called planning, though your plans rarely extend beyond deciding which tree to visit next and whether the current weather conditions warrant any adjustments to your standard sleeping position repertoire. The eastern exposure provides optimal lighting for leaf evaluation, and the branch configuration offers multiple position options for the transition between unconsciousness and the brief period of wakefulness required for basic maintenance activities. Tree number 2 functions as your afternoon residence, chosen for its superior leaf variety and the branch angle that provides perfect support for your preferred midday sleeping position. The canopy density offers excellent sun filtering, creating the kind of dappled shade that promotes optimal unconsciousness while protecting against the temperature extremes that might disrupt your carefully calibrated rest cycles. Tree number 3 completes your territorial triangle as evening headquarters, positioned to catch the last comfortable sunlight of the day and offering the branch configurations most suitable for your extended nighttime sleep positions. The proximity to your territory boundaries allows for passive monitoring of potential territorial incursions, while maintaining the comfortable distance from neighboring koala activities that ensures uninterrupted rest. Achieving zen-like contentment through absolute monotony becomes your greatest philosophical accomplishment, the point where you transcend the common mammalian need for variety and stimulation to find profound satisfaction in the repetition of perfectly optimized activities. Other creatures might require adventure, challenge, or novel experiences to maintain psychological well-being. You've discovered that happiness lies in the complete elimination of surprises, the perfect predictability of days that unfold exactly as expected. This contentment isn't the result of settling for less or accepting limitations. It's the positive outcome of having identified exactly what you need and systematically eliminating everything you don't. Your life has been refined to its essential elements: adequate nutrition, optimal rest, secure territory, and the absence of unnecessary complications. It's minimalism applied to existence itself, except instead of decluttering your possessions, you've decluttered your entire lifestyle. The contentment deepens over time as you realize that your predictable routine isn't confining, it's liberating. When every day unfolds according to established patterns, you're free from the exhausting process of making decisions, solving problems, or adapting to changing circumstances. Your energy can be entirely devoted to the activities that actually matter: sleeping efficiently, eating selectively, and maintaining your territory through strategic inactivity. Other animals begin using you as a landmark, a development that initially seems like it might be insulting, but actually represents recognition of your successful establishment as a permanent, reliable feature of the local ecosystem. Turn left at the sleeping koala becomes common navigation instruction among forest residents who've learned that your location and position can be predicted with accuracy that rivals geological features. Your landmark status brings a certain dignity to your existence. You're not just another koala occupying space in the forest. You're a geographical reference point, a living monument to the benefits of consistency and predictability. Small animals use your territory as a way station during their travels. Birds incorporate your trees into their flight patterns. Even insects seem to recognize your areas as zones of stable, predictable activity, where they can conduct their business without worrying about sudden disruptions. Becoming the grumpy middle-aged koala who judges younger koalas for being too energetic happens gradually, without you consciously deciding to adopt a more critical perspective on the lifestyle choices of the next generation. The transition begins when you start noticing that younger koalas move more than necessary, sleep fewer hours than optimal, and generally conduct themselves with levels of activity that seem both inefficient and vaguely concerning. Your judgment isn't malicious, it's educational. When you observe a younger koala attempting to climb between trees at velocities that exceed basic transportation requirements, your disapproving grunt isn't meant to discourage them personally. It's a commentary on their apparent failure to understand the fundamental principles of energy conservation that govern successful koala existence. The generational differences become particularly apparent during your territorial patrols. Younger koalas approach territory maintenance with what you consider to be excessive enthusiasm, marking boundaries more frequently than necessary, and engaging in territorial displays that involve unnecessary movement and vocalization. They haven't yet learned that true territorial security comes from consistent presence, rather than aggressive demonstration. Your grumpy middle-aged perspective extends to their dietary habits, which strike you as insufficiently sophisticated. They eat leaves without adequate quality assessment, consume varieties that you've long since eliminated from your acceptable options, and generally demonstrate the kind of indiscriminate appetite that suggests they haven't yet developed proper standards for eucalyptus evaluation. Your territory expands through sheer persistence, and the fact that nobody else wants those particular trees, a development that reflects both your commitment to long-term territorial investment and the practical reality that your standards for acceptable habitat are now so specific that few other koalas would consider your territory desirable. The trees you've claimed over the years aren't the most obviously attractive options. They're the ones that provide optimal functionality for your particular lifestyle requirements. The expansion process happens through what might be called territorial osmosis rather than aggressive acquisition. Adjacent areas become part of your range, not because you actively claim them, but because your consistent presence and maintenance activities gradually establish de facto control over spaces that other koalas don't contest. Your territorial boundaries expand outward, like slow-motion conquest conducted entirely through persistence and the absence of competition. Other koalas recognize your expanded territory, not through formal agreements or confrontational negotiations, but through the practical acknowledgement that these areas have become functionally yours through extended occupancy and maintenance. Your scent markers, scratching patterns, and sleeping positions have established territorial signatures that other koalas interpret as evidence of established ownership rather than recent acquisition. Developing a reputation for being reliably unremarkable becomes one of your greatest social achievements. The kind of distinction that might seem contradictory, but actually represents the perfect koala career trajectory. In a society that values consistency, predictability, and the absence of disruptive behavior, being known as someone who can be counted on to maintain exactly the same lifestyle indefinitely is the highest form of social recognition. Your reputation spreads through the koala community via scent trails, territorial observations, and the kind of passive information sharing that occurs when animals occupy the same general ecosystem over extended periods. Other koalas learn that your territory represents a zone of absolute predictability, where nothing unexpected ever happens, where the boundaries are clearly established and consistently maintained, and where interactions will be conducted according to established protocols of mutual indifference. Mastering the subtle art of seasonal sleep position adjustments becomes your equivalent of advanced degrees in multiple academic disciplines. Except instead of accumulating theoretical knowledge, you're developing practical expertise in the optimization of unconsciousness across varying environmental conditions. Your positional repertoire now includes not just basic seasonal categories, but sub-seasonal variations that account for the specific environmental conditions that occur during different phases of each season. Your spring positions account for the increased activity of insects emerging from winter dormancy, the higher pollen concentrations that can affect breathing during sleep, and the temperature fluctuations that occur as weather patterns transition between winter and summer extremes. You've identified branch positions that minimize exposure to insect traffic patterns, while maintaining access to the improved leaf quality that occurs during spring growth phases. Summer positioning strategies now include variations for early summer, peak summer, and late summer conditions, each requiring different approaches to heat management, sun exposure, and hydration conservation. Your early summer positions prepare for gradually increasing temperatures while taking advantage of the extended daylight hours for optimal sleep scheduling. Peak summer positions prioritize maximum heat dissipation and sun protection during the most extreme temperature periods. Your autumn positioning techniques account for the changing leaf quality as eucalyptus trees begin preparing for winter, the increased wind activity that accompanies seasonal weather pattern shifts, and the altered insect and bird activity patterns that occur during migration and preparation for winter. The positions are designed to maintain comfort and security while adapting to the environmental changes that affect sleep quality and safety. Understanding eucalyptus cycles with the precision of a botanical scientist allows you to predict leaf quality variations, optimal feeding times, and the seasonal changes in nutritional content that affect your dietary planning and territorial resource management. Your knowledge extends beyond simple observation to include understanding of the biochemical processes that govern eucalyptus growth, reproduction, and adaptation to environmental conditions. You can predict which trees will produce the best leaves during specific weather conditions, which varieties will maintain acceptable quality during drought periods, and which growth phases will provide optimal nutrition for your specific dietary requirements. This knowledge allows you to plan your territorial activities and feeding schedules around the natural cycles that govern eucalyptus availability and quality. Your understanding includes recognition of the subtle environmental indicators that predict eucalyptus flowering cycles, growth spurts, and the production of new foliage that might expand your dietary options or require adjustments to your leaf quality standards. You've learned to read the signs that indicate when trees are entering stress, periods that might affect leaf palatability, or when they're beginning recovery phases that could improve resource availability. Weather prediction skills that put meteorologists to shame, achieved entirely through nostril analysis to represent your most sophisticated environmental adaptation. The ability to forecast weather changes hours or even days before they become apparent through conventional atmospheric indicators. Your olfactory weather monitoring system operates through detection of the chemical changes that occur in eucalyptus leaves as trees respond to approaching weather systems. Your prediction accuracy extends beyond simple precipitation, forecasting to include wind direction changes, temperature fluctuation timing, and the duration of weather pattern cycles. You can smell approaching cold fronts, detect the atmospheric pressure changes that precede storms, and identify the chemical signatures that indicate extended dry periods or prolonged wet weather cycles. Occasionally tolerating younger koalas who make the mistake of trying to learn from you becomes an unwelcome addition to your otherwise perfectly optimized routine, like having house guests who don't understand that your lifestyle choices aren't meant to be observed, analyzed, or emulated. These educational encounters typically begin when a younger koala positions themselves within your territory, with the apparent intention of studying your techniques and methods. The younger koalas who attempt this approach demonstrate a fundamental misunderstanding of koala mentorship protocols. They seem to expect some form of active instruction, demonstration, or guidance, apparently failing to realize that the koala educational system operates exclusively through observation, imitation, and the kind of trial and error learning that either produces competence or eliminates the incompetent from the gene pool. Your teaching method, refined through several unsuccessful attempts at more active instruction, consists entirely of ignoring them until they figure it out or give up. This isn't cruelty or indifference, it's the most effective educational approach available for creatures whose lifestyle success depends on developing self-reliance, independent problem-solving skills, and the ability to maintain productive solitude without requiring external validation or support. The ignore until resolution method works because it forces younger koalas to develop the same observational skills and trial and error persistence that you used to develop your own expertise. They must learn to interpret your behavior patterns through careful observation rather than expecting verbal explanation or active demonstration. This develops the same analytical and adaptive capabilities that actual koala success requires. Your educational philosophy operates on the principle that anything worth learning can be learned through patient observation and persistent experimentation, while anything that requires active instruction probably isn't essential to successful koala existence anyway. The younger koalas who eventually succeed are those who demonstrate the patience for extended observation and the persistence for repeated attempts at replicating your techniques. The few younger koalas who successfully complete your unofficial mentorship program demonstrate their graduation not through any formal acknowledgement or ceremony, but by successfully establishing their own territories and developing their own optimization systems without requiring further observation of your methods. They move from being student pests to being neighboring colleagues, which represents the highest form of educational achievement in your teaching system. Becoming living proof that success in koala life is measured by how effectively you can do nothing represents your most significant contribution to koala philosophical thought, though you'd never describe it in such grandiose terms. Your existence serves as demonstration that the conventional mammalian approach of constant activity, problem-solving, and environmental manipulation isn't necessary for successful survival and reproductive achievement. Your lifestyle demonstrates that optimal resource utilization, minimal energy expenditure, and strategic inactivity can produce superior long-term outcomes compared to the high-energy, high-risk approaches favored by most other mammals. You've achieved territorial security, adequate nutrition, successful reproduction, and long-term survival through methods that prioritize efficiency over activity and sustainability over short-term gains. Your prime years of professional boring represent the culmination of decades of lifestyle optimization, the period when all your systems reach perfect integration, and you achieve levels of productive inactivity that would be impressive if anyone were keeping track of such achievements. You're sleeping harder, eating slower, and moving less than at any previous point in your adult life, which in koala society represents the kind of peak performance that other mammals achieve through years of athletic training. Sleeping harder involves not just longer unconsciousness periods, but deeper, more efficient sleep that provides better rest and energy conservation, with fewer interruptions or position adjustments required. Your sleep quality has reached the point where you can remain unconscious through environmental disturbances that would wake most other mammals, while maintaining just enough unconscious awareness to respond to genuine threats or territorial challenges. Your eating has become slower and more deliberate, not due to decreased capability but due to increased sophistication in leaf evaluation and consumption techniques. Each leaf receives thorough quality assessment, optimal positioning for efficient processing, and careful mastication that maximizes nutrient extraction while minimizing digestive energy requirements. Your eating process has evolved from simple consumption to something resembling meditation conducted through mastication. Moving less represents the achievement of optimal territorial organization and resource distribution that minimizes the movement required for maintenance of your lifestyle. Your territory is now configured so efficiently that most daily activities can be conducted within minimal travel distances, and your resource management is so effective that extensive territorial patrols are rarely necessary. Achieving perfect work-life balance by eliminating work entirely might seem like a philosophical impossibility, but you've accomplished it through the practical recognition that most activities other mammals consider work are actually inefficient solutions to problems that can be avoided through proper lifestyle design. You don't work to maintain your territory. Your territory maintains itself through your strategic presence and the absence of activities that would require active management. Your approach to problem solving has evolved beyond reactive solutions to preventive lifestyle design that eliminates most problems before they occur. You don't solve conflicts, you avoid situations where conflicts might arise. You don't manage resources, you organize your life around resources that manage themselves. You don't maintain relationships, you establish territorial patterns that provide social benefits without requiring social management. The period when your existence becomes most purely koala-like represents the achievement of perfect species-appropriate living, the point where your lifestyle has been refined to eliminate any activities or characteristics that aren't essential to successful koala existence. You've become the platonic ideal of koala-ness, the perfect embodiment of what koalas are supposed to be and do. This pure koala existence isn't the result of limiting yourself or accepting restrictions. It's the outcome of perfecting the activities that actually matter, while eliminating the distractions that prevent optimal performance, essential koala functions. You've achieved species mastery, becoming not just a successful koala, but the definitive example of how koala life should be conducted. Rare moments of excitement arrive in your otherwise perfectly predictable existence, like unexpected plot twists in a story that's been following the same narrative for years. These adventures are notable precisely because they represent departures from your established routine. Though the departures are so minimal, they wouldn't register as significant events in the lives of more active mammals. Falling asleep in a new tree becomes your equivalent of international travel, requiring extensive preparation, careful risk assessment, and the kind of adventurous spirit that most other mammals would associate with extreme sports. The decision to sleep somewhere other than your 3 established sleeping trees represents a major lifestyle deviation that requires consideration of factors like branch configuration, territorial boundary implications, and the potential disruption to your established sleep optimization protocols. The new tree experience involves comprehensive evaluation of sleeping position options, assessment of security factors, and adjustment of your unconsciousness, monitoring systems to account for unfamiliar environmental variables. The novelty of different bark textures, altered wind patterns, and changed acoustic environments requires adaptation of your sleep techniques, while maintaining the safety and rest quality standards you've established over years of optimization. Trying a slightly different eucalyptus variety represents your version of experimental cuisine, the kind of culinary adventure that requires careful risk management and thorough quality assessment protocols. The decision to sample leaves from a tree species that's outside your established dietary rotation involves evaluation of toxicity levels, fiber content, and flavor profiles that might either expand your nutritional options or confirm why you've been avoiding these particular varieties. The experimental eating process requires gradual introduction of small quantities, careful monitoring of digestive responses, and comparison with your established quality standards for acceptable leaf varieties. The adventure might result in discovery of new dietary options that improve your nutritional range, or it might simply confirm the superiority of your existing leaf preferences and reinforce your commitment to dietary conservatism. Surviving another bushfire season through your patented strategy of climb higher and wait demonstrates the effectiveness of your emergency response protocols while providing the kind of dramatic environmental challenge that tests your crisis management capabilities. Your bushfire survival approach represents the perfect application of koala problem-solving principles: minimal energy expenditure, maximum safety margin, and reliance on patience rather than panic for successful outcomes. The strategy involves early detection of fire conditions through your scent-based environmental monitoring, prompt relocation to the safest available high ground positions, and maintenance of calm assessment of evacuation timing requirements. Your approach prioritizes safety through strategic positioning rather than attempting rapid evacuation, which could be more dangerous than remaining in carefully chosen defensive positions. Human interactions that briefly interrupt your sleep schedule and mildly annoy you provide occasional reminders that your forest environment includes the presence of those peculiar creatures who seem to find your lifestyle choices inexplicably fascinating. These encounters typically involve humans pointing cameras at you while making sounds that might be intended as communication, but mostly serve to disrupt your carefully maintained unconsciousness schedules. Your response to human interaction has evolved from initial confusion to mild irritation to resigned acceptance that these disruptions are part of the environmental conditions you must accommodate. You've developed techniques for maintaining your sleep schedule despite human presence, treating their activities as background noise that can be filtered out through appropriate unconsciousness depth adjustments. The humans seem particularly excited when you engage in normal koala activities like eating or position adjustment, suggesting that your routine behaviors are somehow entertaining to creatures with different lifestyle priorities. You've learned to conduct your necessary activities while minimizing the apparent excitement you generate, which seems to be the most efficient approach to managing these unwanted but apparently unavoidable social interactions. Achieving elder status through the simple act of not dying represents perhaps your greatest accomplishment, though like most of your achievements, it's one that occurred through persistent inaction rather than any dramatic effort or heroic endeavor. In a world where most mammals exhaust themselves through constant activity, territorial disputes, and the kind of high-energy lifestyle choices that lead to early mortality, you've achieved longevity through the revolutionary approach of doing as little as possible for as long as possible. Your survival strategy has been so successful precisely because it avoided all the behaviors that typically lead to premature death in the animal kingdom. You never engaged in risky territorial expansion that might have led to confrontations with stronger competitors. You never pursued romantic relationships that required dangerous displays of athletic prowess. You never explored unfamiliar territories where predators might have better knowledge of local hunting conditions. Instead, you perfected the art of staying exactly where you were, doing exactly what you'd always done, and avoiding any situations that might require decisions more complex than, which leaf should I eat next? The accumulation of wisdom through decades of strategic inactivity has provided you with knowledge that would be invaluable if anyone were interested in learning from your experience, though of course no one is, which suits your temperament perfectly. Your accumulated knowledge represents the kind of practical expertise that can only be gained through extensive personal experience, trial and error, and the patience to observe environmental patterns over multiple seasonal cycles. Your tree comfort database now includes detailed knowledge of every branch configuration in your territory, ranking systems for sleeping positions based on weather conditions, seasonal variations, and time of day requirements. You know which branches provide optimal support during different sleep phases, which positions minimize pressure points during extended unconsciousness periods, and how to adjust your body positioning to account for age-related changes in flexibility and joint comfort. Your leaf indigestion prevention knowledge represents decades of careful dietary experimentation, the kind of gastronomic wisdom that comes from personally experiencing the consequences of every possible eucalyptus variety consumption mistake. You can predict with remarkable accuracy which leaves will cause digestive discomfort, which combinations of tree varieties should be avoided, and how environmental conditions affect the palatability and digestibility of different eucalyptus species. This knowledge extends to understanding the seasonal cycles that affect leaf quality, the daily timing that influences toxin concentrations, and the weather conditions that either enhance or degrade the nutritional value of your dietary options. You've learned to read the subtle visual cues that indicate when leaves have reached optimal maturity for consumption, when they've begun to decline in quality, and when they should be avoided entirely due to elevated toxic compound levels. Becoming the koala equivalent of a wise hermit, except less wise and more sleepy, represents your achievement of the perfect balance between accumulated knowledge and the practical application of that knowledge through continued commitment to minimal energy expenditure. Unlike traditional hermits who might use their accumulated wisdom for teaching, philosophical contemplation, or spiritual guidance, you've achieved wisdom specifically for the purpose of sleeping more efficiently and eating more selectively. Your hermit status isn't the result of rejecting society. It's the natural outcome of having perfected a lifestyle that requires minimal social interaction while providing maximum personal satisfaction. You've become wise about the things that actually matter in koala existence: comfort, optimization, resource conservation, and the maintenance of territorial security through strategic indifference to everything that doesn't directly affect your immediate survival requirements. The wisdom you've accumulated would be transferable to other koalas if they were capable of appreciating the subtle complexities of advanced sleep positioning, sophisticated leaf evaluation, and the strategic use of territorial presence for maximum security benefits. However, since most koalas prefer to learn through their own trial and error experiences, your wisdom remains largely personal, which eliminates any pressure to become an active teacher or mentor. Your hermit wisdom includes understanding of long-term environmental patterns, seasonal cycles, and the behavioral patterns of other forest residents that affect your territorial security and resource availability. You've observed enough complete annual cycles to predict environmental changes, animal migration patterns, and the seasonal variations in human activity that might affect your preferred lifestyle of productive unconsciousness. Your trees have evolved from simple habitat into prime real estate, the kind of established territory that represents decades of careful maintenance, strategic positioning, and the accumulation of environmental modifications that make these particular eucalyptus specimens significantly more valuable than similar trees in less developed locations. The territorial improvements you've implemented through years of consistent occupation have created a property portfolio that would be coveted by younger koalas if they possessed the sophistication to appreciate the subtle enhancements that distinguish premium territory from merely adequate habitat. The scent marking systems you've established over decades have created aromatic boundaries that function like invisible property lines, clearly demarcating your territorial claims while providing information about your presence, activity patterns, and territorial maintenance schedule. These scent signatures have become so well established that they function as natural deterrents for potential territorial challengers, while serving as navigation aids that help you locate optimal positions within your territory during periods of reduced visibility. Your sleeping position optimization has resulted in the development of specialized branch configurations that have been shaped through years of consistent use into perfect sleeping platforms. The bark patterns in your preferred resting locations have been worn smooth through repeated contact, creating custom-fitted sleeping surfaces that provide superior comfort compared to unmodified branches. These improvements represent significant infrastructure investments that add considerable value to your territorial holdings. The defensive fortifications you've created through strategic scratching and territorial marking have established your territory as a well-defended zone that would require considerable effort for younger koalas to successfully challenge. Your territorial boundaries are clearly marked, consistently maintained, and defended by someone with demonstrated commitment to long-term territorial occupation and the patience for extended conflicts of will. However, younger koalas who covet your prime real estate don't appreciate your continued presence, viewing you as an obstacle to their territorial ambitions rather than as the legitimate long-term occupant who has earned exclusive access through decades of consistent investment and maintenance. They observe your territory with the kind of acquisitive interest that real estate developers might show when evaluating properties for potential development opportunities. These younger koalas demonstrate their territorial interest through increasingly bold incursions into your range, testing your defensive responses and evaluating your commitment to maintaining exclusive occupation. They position themselves just outside your established boundaries and conduct what amounts to territorial reconnaissance, assessing your activity patterns and response capabilities. Defending your territory through advanced techniques like aggressive napping and hostile leaf chewing represents the evolution of your territorial defense strategies, from the more energetic approaches of your younger years to sophisticated psychological warfare, conducted entirely through the strategic deployment of your daily routine activities. These techniques are effective precisely because they require no additional energy expenditure while clearly communicating your continued territorial commitment. Aggressive napping involves strategically positioning yourself in locations that maximize your visibility to potential challengers, while demonstrating that you're so secure in your territorial control that you can afford to sleep in exposed positions. The technique sends clear messages about your confidence in your territorial security while maintaining your commitment to energy conservation through extended unconsciousness periods. The psychological impact of aggressive napping operates through the demonstration that you're not concerned enough about territorial challenges to maintain conscious vigilance, suggesting either supreme confidence in your defensive capabilities or such complete territorial control that challenges are irrelevant. Younger koalas interpret this display as evidence of either formidable defensive resources or the kind of entrenched territorial position that would be extremely difficult to challenge successfully. Hostile leaf chewing involves conducting your normal dietary activities with deliberate, methodical precision that emphasizes your exclusive access to territorial resources while demonstrating your commitment to consuming these resources, regardless of any territorial pressure from potential challengers. The technique combines resource consumption with territorial display, maximizing efficiency while maintaining defensive messaging. The slow realization that you've become a geographical feature represents perhaps the most significant development in your territorial evolution, the point where your presence has become so established and predictable that other forest residents treat your location as a permanent landscape element, rather than the temporary occupation of a mobile animal. Your territorial integration has reached the level where you're no longer considered a visiting occupant, but rather a constituent part of the forest ecosystem. This geographical status provides significant advantages in terms of territorial security, since geographical features don't typically face challenges from animals seeking to establish territorial claims. Your integration into the landscape has reached the point where displacing you would seem as unnatural as attempting to relocate a particularly large rock or fallen log that's been in position for decades. Your fur becomes distinguished in the way that suggests accumulated wisdom and experience, rather than simple aging, though the distinction is achieved through becoming grayer and significantly more unkempt than during your prime years. The color changes reflect not just the passage of time, but also your evolving priorities, which no longer include the kind of grooming maintenance that might have been important during your reproductive years, but now seems like unnecessary energy expenditure. The gray patterns in your fur develop according to genetics and environmental exposure, creating a natural highlighting effect that distinguishes you from younger koalas while providing visual evidence of your survival success and territorial longevity. The graying process occurs gradually, allowing you to maintain your essential koala appearance while developing the kind of distinguished look that commands respect from younger animals. Your grooming standards have evolved from the meticulous maintenance routines of your younger years to a more practical approach that prioritizes functionality over appearance. The slight unkemptness of your fur represents not neglect, but rather the rational allocation of energy resources toward activities that provide survival benefits, rather than cosmetic improvements that serve no practical purpose in your established territorial situation. The unkempt appearance also serves subtle territorial functions, suggesting to potential challengers that you're so secure in your position that you don't need to maintain the kind of pristine appearance that younger koalas might use to attract mates or impress territorial rivals. Your appearance communicates the confidence of someone who has transcended concerns about social impressions in favor of practical efficiency. Movement becomes even more economical, as you develop increasingly sophisticated techniques for accomplishing necessary activities with minimum energy expenditure, refining your motion efficiency to the point where every gesture serves multiple purposes and no movement is wasted on merely transitional or positioning activities. Why use 10 movements when 3 will do? Especially when those 3 movements can be optimized to accomplish the objectives that would have required extensive activity sequences during your less experienced years. Your movement optimization has reached the level where routine activities like territory, patrol, feeding position adjustment, and sleeping location transitions are accomplished through carefully planned sequences that minimize total energy expenditure while maintaining adequate coverage of necessary functions. Each movement serves strategic purposes that extend beyond the immediate activity to support longer-term territorial maintenance and resource management objectives. The economic movement approach extends to your sleeping position adjustments, which now require fewer repositioning movements to achieve optimal comfort and security throughout extended unconsciousness periods. Your body has developed the kind of spatial awareness that allows for precise positioning with minimal adjustment, reducing the energy costs associated with maintaining comfortable sleep positions during varying environmental conditions. Your climbing efficiency has reached masterful levels, where complex branch-to-branch transitions are accomplished through minimal movement sequences that conserve energy while maintaining complete safety margins. The climbing movements have been refined through decades of practice to eliminate any unnecessary motion, while maximizing the effectiveness of each grip, reach, and positioning adjustment. Developing the 1,000-yard stare of someone who has seen every possible variation of eucalyptus leaf represents the achievement of complete dietary experience, the point where your accumulated leaf evaluation knowledge has reached comprehensive coverage of all possible eucalyptus varieties, quality levels, and preparation conditions that might be encountered during normal koala existence. The 1,000-yard stare isn't vacancy or inattention. It's the expression of someone whose pattern recognition capabilities have been developed to the point where new experiences rarely provide genuinely novel information. You've seen leaves in every stage of development, every weather condition, every seasonal variation, and every quality level that occurs within normal eucalyptus ecology. Your stare reflects not boredom, but the kind of comprehensive knowledge that no longer requires intense focus to process familiar information. This expression develops gradually, as your experience base expands to cover essentially all possible variations within your environmental niche, creating a situation where new leaf encounters typically represent minor variations on familiar patterns rather than genuinely new learning opportunities. The stare reflects the efficiency that comes from having seen enough variations that pattern recognition operates automatically, freeing your conscious attention for other priorities. Rare instances of conscious thought about your life choices occur during those unusual periods when your unconsciousness schedule experiences minor disruptions, creating brief windows of unwanted awareness during which your mind wanders into the dangerous territory of self-evaluation and life assessment. These reflective moments are sufficiently rare that they feel almost foreign, like experiencing someone else's thought patterns or accidentally tuning into a mental frequency that doesn't usually operate in your consciousness. Your life choices, when subjected to this unusual analytical attention, reveal themselves to be remarkably simple and surprisingly effective. The major decisions that shaped your existence number exactly two: where to establish your territory, and which eucalyptus varieties to include in your regular dietary rotation. Everything else has been variations on these themes, adjustments and optimizations that refine the basic choices without fundamentally altering their underlying logic. The territory selection decision, made during your transition to independent adult status, has proven remarkably successful over the decades. The trees you chose have provided adequate resources, comfortable sleeping accommodations, and sufficient security to support your lifestyle requirements without requiring major modifications or relocations. The choice demonstrates either exceptional foresight or remarkable luck, though the practical outcome is identical regardless of which interpretation is more accurate. Your dietary choices have similarly proven their worth through extended practical application, providing adequate nutrition while avoiding the digestive complications that might have resulted from less conservative leaf selection strategies. The eucalyptus varieties you decided to accept into your regular rotation have consistently delivered the nutritional benefits necessary for survival, while avoiding the toxic compound levels that could have caused health problems or forced dietary modifications. Philosophical contemplation of whether you've wasted your life leads to the logical conclusion that waste implies there was something else you could have been doing with your time, which raises the interesting question of what alternative activities might have provided superior outcomes compared to your chosen lifestyle of strategic inactivity and resource optimization through minimal energy expenditure. The analysis of alternative lifestyle options reveals that most activities available to koalas involve either increased energy expenditure, elevated risk levels, or reduced comfort and security compared to your chosen approach. More active territorial expansion would have required conflict management and resource competition that could have resulted in territorial loss rather than gain. More adventurous dietary choices could have led to digestive problems or accidental poisoning from eucalyptus varieties with elevated toxin levels. More extensive social interaction would have required energy allocation toward relationship maintenance and social obligation management that would have reduced the resources available for territorial optimization and personal comfort. Maintenance. The alternative lifestyle choices appear to offer primarily increased complexity and energy requirements rather than superior outcomes in terms of survival, territorial security, or personal satisfaction. The philosophical question of life waste dissolves when examined through the lens of practical outcomes rather than abstract ideals about productivity or achievement. Your life has been successful, according to every meaningful metric available for koala existence. Survival, territorial security, adequate nutrition, and the maintenance of personal comfort and autonomy. The absence of dramatic achievements or exciting adventures represents not waste, but rather the intelligent allocation of resources towards sustainable long-term benefits rather than short-term stimulation. Accepting that your legacy will be occupied those trees for a really long time brings a sense of peace that might surprise mammals who measure success through more dramatic metrics like territorial conquest, extensive offspring production, or the achievement of dominant social status within complex hierarchical systems. Your legacy is modest, practical, and entirely sustainable, representing the kind of environmental integration that provides genuine benefit without requiring unsustainable resource consumption or competitive displacement of other forest residents. The legacy of extended territorial occupation provides ongoing benefits that extend beyond your personal lifetime, creating improved habitat conditions that will benefit future koala generations, while demonstrating the viability of long-term sustainable resource management through strategic inactivity and energy conservation. Your approach represents a successful model for koala existence that prioritizes sustainability over expansion and stability over excitement. Reluctantly, allowing younger koalas to observe your techniques represents your compromise between your natural inclination toward complete solitude and your grudging recognition that the accumulated knowledge of decades spent perfecting the art of productive inactivity might have some educational value for koalas who demonstrate sufficient patience and respect for your preferred learning methodologies. The younger koalas who approach you for observational learning typically demonstrate the kind of persistence that suggests they might eventually develop the patience necessary for successful koala lifestyle implementation, though their initial approaches often involve energy expenditure levels and social interaction expectations that are incompatible with your educational philosophy and daily routine requirements. Your teaching philosophy has evolved through trial and error toward the recognition that effective koala education operates through extended observation rather than active instruction, since the skills that define successful koala existence, sleep optimization, leaf quality assessment, and territorial maintenance, through strategic presence, cannot be adequately communicated through verbal explanation or demonstration, but must be internalized through personal experience and careful pattern recognition. The philosophy operates on the principle that if younger koalas are quiet enough and patient enough, they can observe your daily routine and draw their own conclusions about the techniques and strategies that have enabled your survival and territorial success. This approach eliminates the energy expenditure that would be required for active teaching, while providing educational opportunities for students who demonstrate appropriate learning attitudes. The quiet enough requirement serves multiple educational functions, teaching respect for elder privacy, while demonstrating the importance of minimal environmental disruption for successful koala lifestyle implementation. Students who cannot maintain adequate silence during observation periods reveal their unsuitability for learning techniques that depend on environmental awareness and the ability to conduct necessary activities without attracting unwanted praxis. Attention. The observational learning approach requires students to develop analytical skills, pattern recognition abilities, and the patience for extended information gathering that are essential for independent koala success. Students must learn to identify the subtle techniques that distinguish expert-level performance from amateur attempts, developing discrimination abilities that will serve them throughout their careers in professional inactivity. Your teaching methodology extends ancient koala wisdom transmission protocols that have been refined over generations to eliminate unnecessary energy expenditure while maintaining educational effectiveness. The wisdom you pass on represents practical knowledge that cannot be gained through theoretical study, but requires personal experience and careful observation of successful implementation. Ancient koala wisdom includes fundamental safety principles like always check the branch before committing your full weight, which represents the distillation of survival knowledge that could prevent the kinds of accidents that end koala careers prematurely. This wisdom encompasses both the practical mechanics of branch assessment and the philosophical approach that prioritizes caution over speed in all territorial navigation decisions. The branch checking principle extends beyond simple weight-bearing assessment to include evaluation of branch stability under varying weather conditions, seasonal changes in wood strength and flexibility, and the assessment of backup positioning options that provide safety margins during climbing activities. The wisdom represents the kind of comprehensive safety thinking that develops only through extensive experience with potential failure modes. Additional wisdom transmission includes leaf quality assessment techniques that enable students to identify optimal eucalyptus varieties while avoiding the digestive problems that result from inadequate quality control standards. This knowledge includes visual assessment methods, olfactory evaluation techniques, and the timing strategies that optimize leaf selection for maximum nutritional value and minimum toxic compound exposure. Noticing that the forest has changed over the years occurs gradually, through the accumulation of small observations that eventually combine into the recognition that your environment has undergone modifications that affect both the availability of resources and the overall character of your territorial ecosystem. The changes are subtle enough that they might be missed by animals with shorter attention spans or less detailed environmental awareness, but your decades of observation have provided baseline knowledge that makes environmental shifts apparent even when they occur slowly. The most obvious change involves the simple fact that there's less forest than there used to be, a development that has occurred through the gradual conversion of eucalyptus habitat into human residential and commercial developments that eliminate trees and replace them with structures that provide no benefits for koala lifestyle. Requirements. The forest reduction has happened slowly enough that adaptation has been possible, but consistently enough that the overall trend is unmistakable. Your territorial boundaries, once surrounded by extensive eucalyptus habitat that provided buffer zones and expansion opportunities, are now more clearly defined by the edges of remaining forest areas. The territorial security that once depended on the availability of alternative locations now requires more careful resource management and greater commitment to maintaining current territorial holdings rather than depending on expansion options. The forest fragmentation has created increased contact with human activities and infrastructure requiring adaptation to noise levels, visual disruptions, and the presence of domestic animals that weren't factors during your earlier territorial establishment. These adaptations have been manageable because your lifestyle already emphasized minimal activity and maximum environment tolerance, but they represent changes that affect daily routine planning and territorial patrol considerations. Adapting to human presence with your characteristic indifference represents perhaps your greatest achievement in environmental adaptation, the successful application of your core philosophical principle, strategic indifference to phenomena that don't directly threaten immediate survival, to circumstances that might cause significant stress for animals with different temperamental approaches to environmental change. Your indifference strategy operates through the recognition that human activities, while sometimes disruptive, don't typically pose direct threats to koalas, who maintain appropriate distance and avoid behaviors that might trigger human intervention. Humans appear to be primarily interested in observing koala behavior rather than interfering with koala lifestyle choices, which makes them manageable through simple avoidance and the maintenance of normal routine activities. The human presence has been integrated into your environmental awareness systems as a background factor that requires monitoring but doesn't typically require active response. Humans follow predictable activity patterns that can be learned and anticipated, allowing for schedule adjustments that minimize interaction while maintaining access to necessary territorial resources and sleeping locations. Your adaptation strategy includes the recognition that humans seem to find koala behavior intrinsically interesting, which provides some protection against harmful interference, since humans appear to value koala presence sufficiently to avoid activities that might drive koalas away from accessible observation locations. This creates a stable coexistence pattern that benefits both species through mutual non-interference. Becoming a tourist attraction through no effort of your own represents the ultimate achievement in accidental fame, the kind of recognition that results from simply continuing your normal lifestyle, while humans develop increasingly sophisticated systems for observing and documenting your routine activities. Your celebrity status has been achieved entirely through persistence in being exactly what you've always been, in exactly the same location, for a period of time that humans apparently consider remarkable. The tourist attraction status provides certain practical benefits, including increased protection from activities that might disrupt your territorial security, and the maintenance of buffer zones around your habitat that preserve the environmental conditions necessary for continued successful koala lifestyle implementation. Humans seem committed to maintaining your habitat in conditions that support your continued presence and observable behavior. Your fame requires no promotional activities, public appearances, or modification of your routine to accommodate audience expectations. The tourists appear to be fascinated by the opportunity to observe genuine koala behavior in natural habitat conditions, which means that maintaining your normal lifestyle choices automatically provides the entertainment value that attracts continued human interest and protection. The irony of achieving fame through the dedicated pursuit of complete anonymity and environmental integration isn't lost on you during those rare moments when you engage in conscious reflection about your circumstances. Your success as a tourist attraction results directly from your commitment to being as unremarkable and predictable as possible, which suggests that authenticity and consistency have greater entertainment value than manufactured excitement or artificial behavior modification. Your tourist attraction status has stabilized into a sustainable system, where human observation activities are conducted with sufficient respect for your routine, that they don't significantly disrupt your daily schedule or territorial maintenance activities. The humans have learned to observe without interfering, which represents the optimal outcome for both species and demonstrates the possibility of beneficial coexistence based on mutual respect for different lifestyle priorities and environmental needs. As the seasons drift past with their usual unhurried pace, you find yourself settling into what can only be described as the pinnacle of koala existence, a state so thoroughly unremarkable that it borders on the transcendent. Your energy levels, once hovering somewhere between barely perceptible and did something just move, have gracefully descended to what scientists might generously classify as essentially non-existent. This is not decline, this is evolution toward perfect efficiency. Your sleep cycles, already the envy of every exhausted human on the planet, extend beyond the already impressive 22-hour standard. You've discovered that with proper dedication and the right eucalyptus-induced stupor, it's possible to achieve a 23.5-hour sleep schedule, leaving just enough consciousness to occasionally shift position and confirm that yes, you are still magnificently boring. Through this gradual surrender to inactivity, you achieve something approaching enlightenment. Perfect harmony with your environment by becoming essentially indistinguishable from it. Tourists now mistake you for an unusually furry branch growth, which pleases you in the way that very little else could, which is to say, barely at all. The word adventure feels almost comically inappropriate for what comprises your final forays into activity, but in the context of a koala's existence, these moments represent the epic conclusion to a lifetime of spectacular mundanity. Your final territory patrols are conducted at the speed of geological processes. What once took you a leisurely hour now unfolds over the course of several days, as you move from tree to tree with the deliberate patience of someone who has finally understood that rushing is the enemy of true contentment. Each movement is so gradual that the local bird population has begun using you as a reliable landmark. If the koala has moved from the fork to the main branch, it must be Tuesday. There comes a morning or perhaps afternoon, time having become a fluid concept when you encounter what you somehow recognize will be your last perfect eucalyptus leaf. It hangs at just the right height, possesses that ideal balance of tenderness and flavor, and seems to exist specifically for this moment. You approach it with the reverence of a true connoisseur, someone who has spent years developing an appreciation for the subtle notes and textures that distinguish merely adequate eucalyptus from the truly exceptional. The consumption of this leaf becomes a meditation, each chew deliberate and considered. You taste not just the leaf itself, but the tree's entire history, the rains that nourished it, the soil that sustained it, the countless quiet days that brought it to this moment of perfect ripeness. It is, you realize with something approaching satisfaction, the most boring and therefore most beautiful meal of your life. After years of quiet, dedicated inactivity, you settle into your favorite sleeping spot for the last time, a branch worn smooth by your presence, shaped perfectly to your form. Your life has left little trace. Faint eucalyptus scent, a groove in the bark, perhaps a photo where you were mistaken for a plush toy. You consumed only what you needed, disturbed nothing, and sought nothing more than food, sleep, and stillness. While others rushed through their lives, you mastered the art of doing nothing. Now, returning to the tree where it all began, or one like it, you recognize the poetic justice of a perfectly uneventful life. Your final thoughts dissolve into eucalyptus-flavored calm. In death, you leave behind not a legacy, but a flawless example of peaceful indifference. Another koala will find your branch, your scent, and continue the cycle. The forest goes on unchanged, and that, beautifully, is the point.